Hello, welcome to Glasgow Rangers Nation with me, your host, Erin James, the channel that brings you your Rangers news every single day, guys. Look, we're going to talk a little bit about two of Rangers' big problems. And no, I'm not talking about Cyril Dessers or James Tavernier or even Robin Propper or Phil Clermont. Well, I am indirectly talking about Philippe Clermont, but I'm going to talk about two of the major issues I think the club have at this moment in time. No, not the board. Not the board. Um, I think there's two things that kind of, well, I think there's a lot of things, well, of course I do, but I think there's two things that are really spoiling this team to some degree. One that kind of is part of a whole overall factor that is ruining this team in terms of the shape, the style, the way we play, and the type of football that Rangers do play on a regular basis. And I think the other one is an outside sort of group that are kind of interfering to some degree with the effectiveness and the continuity of the team. We're going to talk a bit about sports science, and I think that they are having a negative rather than a positive effect on Rangers, and that doesn't always go for sports science if it's used correctly. Right, I mean, let's start off with the first thing. I honestly believe that Rangers are a moments team. They're not a good team. They're not a very good. They're not even a very a very average team. They are just basically bang average. I wouldn't even say they're a team to some degree. I mean, the football we play is disjointed. The football we play doesn't seem to have any shape, pattern, style. And we had a little bit of it in the Europa League. We had a little bit of it against Celtic, and then it kind of disappeared again. It's hit and miss. It's not good enough. It's not high enough standard, and what I would call a moments team. Now, what do I mean by a moments team? For those of you who don't understand, obviously, what a moments team is. Basically, as a club, we rely on players and individuals coming up with certain moments to win games. It is down to not great teamwork, not great team play, not consistently great team play, not a consistently great team performance. It is merely down to an individual to do something remarkable, to score a goal or to create a chance to score a goal and help Rangers win a game. There is clearly no, it's not a style of play that we have, that we come out, we play, that we impose on opposition teams, that we then go on to, to dominate and then go on to beat those opposition teams. I mean, certainly if you cast your eye across the other side of the city, you would say that Celtic do have a style of football. They have a shape, they have a set of tactics, they have patterns of play, and they are very effective at doing what they do. And even when those patterns of play aren't working to some extent, they still somehow, as a team, manage to find a way to beat most teams, or find that moment, as a team to beat whoever they play. There are the odd slip ups, because let's face it, no team is perfect. Even the great Barcelona teams of Messi, Xavi, Iniesta, Puyol, Busquets, Jordi Alba, Samuel Eto'o, Neymar, Thierry Henry, all those players, even they had times when they weren't fantastic. Even they had times when their football wasn't scintillating. Now, I'm not expecting Rangers to play every single game like their prime Real Madrid or prime Barcelona. I'm not expecting that, but I think we as a team, we become over-reliant on one player or one individual doing something to create the opportunity to win a game. And it's not down to consistent team play. Now, in a game where we come up against a good side like Celtic, like Spurs, like some of the Europa League teams we come up against, it just can't be done. That individual can't pull out that moment of brilliance because they just haven't got that in their locker to go past or to beat or to individually take on and create a chance. They need support, they need help, and it isn't there because we don't play as a team. We don't play, with a pattern of play. We don't play with a shape. We don't play with a style. There is clearly nothing there, and that yes is partly down to the players, but is majorly down to the manager, because the manager hasn't got a pattern of play, hasn't got a style, he hasn't got a shape that works. Now, to some extent, what he does try to do works in Europe, because you do get more time on the ball in Europe than you do in Scotland or in England. But For me, Clement lacks a basic pattern of play. He lacks a shape, he lacks a style, lacks a set of tactics that actually genuinely work in this league, particularly obviously against the low block. Now, one of the points that's kind of levelled, and I read this in a comment that was written earlier. Steven Gerrard didn't have the best of starts. Steven Gerrard didn't cover himself in glory at the start of his time at Rangers. But the one thing I will say about Gerrard is, and people talk about, I heard as well, Clement's footballing CV, but Gerrard, this was his first managerial appointment. You can't say that when Gerrard, you can't start comparing managerial CVs when someone has just only been appointed to a job, someone who's new into management. Now, the one thing I will say about Gerrard's Rangers, even when we fell away, even pre-55, and I think there's a lot of rubbish spoken about, titles won when there's no fans there. That is ridiculous. We still won a league title. I think if you come out and you say that Rangers only won 55 because there was no fans there, you're starting to sound like the other side of the city. I'll be honest. Look, Gerrard had a plan. He had a style. He had a pattern of play. He had a shape. If you watched a Gerrard team, you could see what he was trying to achieve. You could see the players bought in to what he was trying to do, and they bought in by showing how that through the style and the way they played the game. Now, with Clement's Rangers, you cannot see a buy-in, you cannot see a shape, you cannot see a plan, you cannot see a progression, and you cannot see a clear plan of where we're going. The team selections, the substitutions, the shape, the lack of shape, the lack of pattern, the lack of style, all shows you that there is no grand plan there. There is no plan A, there's no plan B, there's no plan C. I mean, plan A doesn't work, and there's still plan B is to do plan A, but with different players on the pitch, which doesn't seem to work. Whereas Gerrard, you felt, had a plan A, he had a plan B, and he had a vision, and he had a way of playing, and you could see where he was going with it, and eventually, obviously, it worked. And I believe that if he'd stayed post 55, we would have won another league title. But we've become a moments team. We've become a team that relies on individuals to do something brilliant to win a game. And that's it. And that's not what you need to be successful. You cannot win league titles doing that. You cannot win in Europe doing that. So for me, that is something that is down to the manager to change. And that is an issue the manager quite clearly has. Now, the other big issue for me is sports science. I think sports science is a massive issue for Rangers. I think the problem we've got is that sports science has way too much say in the selection of the team. It has way too much say in which players play, how long they play for. Now, sports science used correctly can work. As someone like Sam Allardyce showed at Bolton, getting Bolton to finish in the top 5 of the Premier League, or I think they finished 5th or 6th, in the Premier League, which was a remarkable achievement. But I really do feel that Clement restricts himself, with his team selections, and restricts himself with his player availability by listening to the sports scientists too much. We've had Cortez, for example, on the bench for the last 2 games, and he has not featured at any point. Yet, in both games we were struggling to create chances. In both games we were crying out for width, we were crying out for a shape, and he didn't bring on a winger. Now, is that because the sports scientists are telling him that he cannot play him for any longer than X or Y, or that he is fit enough to be on the bench but not fit enough to play? And if he's not fit enough to play, why is he on the bench? You've got to kind of look at that. The other thing I think is that Clement listens to them too much with players. He doesn't use his own judgment as a coach. He doesn't use his own his own knowledge of what players can and can't do. And I think at times players will surprise you with what they can and can't do. I think at times he kind of picks the 11 that the sports scientists tell him are the fittest, and he kind of just puts those 11 on, and he kind of shoehorns players into the wrong position. Sterling as a centre back, Bayrami as a winger, Fabio Silva as a winger last season. You see things and you just think, well, why are we doing that? And these 11 players that are out there, are they really the best idea and the best selections? And I genuinely think at times they're not. And I think he listens to the sports scientists way too much, and they have way too much say over who plays, how long they play for, and when they play and when they don't play. That decision for me has to come down to the manager and the player. Looking at what the player can and can't do, looking at the player in training, looking at the player himself, talking to the player himself. I mean, I think that, like I said, with the Bolton example, with sports science can work. I think maybe we've just got somebody duff sports scientist at Rangers. I don't know, but for me, sports science is playing way too much of having too much of a hold over Clement and his team selections. This ridiculousness that players, when they first come back, they can only play X number of minutes. They can't start games. They can't do this. Yet you go elsewhere in Europe and you look at other teams and you look at other managers, and they're not afraid to put someone who's just come back in from injury back into the side. They're not afraid to give half an hour, 30, 35, 40 minutes to a player who's just come back from injury. And they pick players and they talk to players and they listen to players when it comes to their fitness, rather than listening solely to the sports scientists. I think Clement listens too much to sports scientists. I firmly believe that Clement needs to kind of stop listening to them if he's going to save his job, and actually, pick the best players, pick the best 11 to win a game, pick the strongest 11. Now, like I said, they're two big problems that I've kind of looked at away from those obvious problems that we all talk about: the formation, the lack of tactics, the lack of style, the manager's motivation, his substitutions, the in-game management, the pathetic form, the injuries. There's an awful lot going on. They're just kind of two things that I've kind of picked out, that I think play a role and that need to be changed at Rangers, that do need to kind of be looked at and kind of put right, if we're going to be successful at all, ever. I think a lot of it, is down to the manager. But I'll repeat what I said on the video yesterday. I don't think it is solely Clement. I think there is elements of everybody having a role to play in this. Coppen, the board, the players, and the manager. Yes, I think the manager carries the majority of the blame for what goes on, but not the whole of the blame for what goes on. But that is kind of two ideas and two things that I wanted to kind of bring to your attention and get your thoughts and ideas on. Well, thank you for watching Glasgow Rangers Nation, guys. As always, on the way out, please smash the like, sub, comment, share, do all that fantastic stuff and help the channel to keep on growing. But always remember, please never forget, we are the people.